Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will call the Board of Examiners meeting to order. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day. All members are present. Can you hear us loud and clear in Las Vegas?
Yes, Governor.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to agenda item number 2, which is public comment. Is there any member of the public present in Carson City that would like to provide public comment to the board? I hear and see no one. Is there anyone present in Las Vegas that would like to provide public comment to the board?
No, Governor, nobody here.
All right, thank you. Agenda item number 3, approval of the May 18, 2018 meeting minutes. Have the members had an opportunity to review the minutes, and are there any changes?
I have none, and I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Secretary. The Secretary of State has moved to approve the May 8, 2018 meeting minutes. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by the Attorney General. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I hear none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 That motion passes 3-0. We'll move to agenda item number 4, Victims of Crime Fiscal Year 2018 Third Quarter Report and Fiscal Year 2018 Fourth Quarter Recommendation. Mr. Wells, good morning.
Good morning, Governor and members of the board. Pursuant to NRS 217.260, the Board of Examiners is required to estimate the available revenue and anticipated claim costs for the State Victims of Crime Program. This item includes a report on the claims paid in the third quarter of fiscal year 2018 and a recommendation to pay priority 1, 2, and 3 claims at 100% for the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2018. When this report was submitted, the program anticipated having a reserve at the end of the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2018 of approximately $7.3 million after covering all of the expenses and a 45-day operating reserve. And that is an increase of approximately $2 million from the projected reserves at the end of the third quarter, but is still down about $4.4 million from the first quarter projected reserves of $11.7. The decrease is primarily due to the number of claims filed subsequent to the Route 91 mass casualty event on October 1st. It appears that the program has begun to stabilize since October 1st, but the fund will have a lower balance at the end of the fourth quarter than it had in the last 3 fiscal years. Agency representatives are still telling us that they will are expecting to receive additional federal funding to offset those expenses. So at this time, the $7.3 million, I believe, is a reasonable reserve for this program. And there are representatives from the Victims of Crime Program to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. And I think I recall that we had this conversation last meeting or the meeting before, and that do we know when we will get reimbursed or that extra money will come that is associated with October 1?
We have not heard anything yet as to the exact date where we will get it. I believe that the last time I heard, they're looking at coordinating the 2 Victims of Crime program, the one that's run under DCFS and the one under the Department of Administration, into a single request. And so I believe that that's been part of the delay.
All right, thank you. Board members, any questions with regard to agenda item number 4?
If I might, Governor, this is Barbara. I was just curious if there's any more thought of how many more victims might have claims. Do we have that at all? Any information?
Yes.
Go ahead and turn the mic on. Thank you. There you go.
Yes, Rebecca Salazar, Program Manager for Victims of Crime. There's still about just under 200 injured who have not applied. And we've made as many efforts as we can to reach those people, so hopefully at some point they will apply. Early on, the consultants that were here from the Federal Office for Victims of Crime said that traditionally in these types of things you get about 25% of the people affected apply. So that would be somewhere around 6,000. And as of today we had 4,000, let me see. We've received 4,693 applications. So hopefully we'll get about 1,300 more. We have a 1-year deadline, so there's been a lot of press releases coming out about that deadline and trying to encourage people to apply. So we'll continue those efforts.
Okay, and thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Governor.
I have a question.
All right, Mr. Attorney General.
So I just wanted to hear from you guys, kind of reiterating what Mr. Wells said, that you all are confident that we have enough money with the October 1 incident victims reimbursements also in the coming year?
We are confident, yes. It is a decrease from the past years, but if you go back further, we always had only 4 or 5 million in reserve, and then we built up this big reserve. So now it's a good thing that we did that because we've had to kind of dip into it. But going forward with the amount that we're paying every week and quarterly, we don't expect it to.
And it's starting to stabilize. Michelle Morgando. It's starting to stabilize now. We had, particularly with the catastrophic claims, a large increase in payouts, and then it's gradually been dropping until I think at this point, what I'm approving is, fairly level each week.
Okay, great.
Primarily going forward, we're expecting just a lot of counseling, which is not high expense.
And that has a cap on the benefits as well.
Okay, great. And then if I could follow up a little bit on the governor's question, can you explain where we are in the DOJ reimbursement process, like whether we've already applied?
Yes. Mr. Wells was referring to the VOCA assistance program. We are both filing applications. It's not necessarily a joint application, but they were submitted at the same time by all working with all the same people and working together. So at this point, what I understand is
When was
that
that filed?
it's been within the last month and a half. It's not our final draft that's been filed yet. Right now, our first draft has been submitted to the grant manager for review. We expect that they will kick it back with some requested edits, and then we will submit the final.
And then 6 months from there, you think, probably?
It's hard to say
Okay.
because it's brand new, so hopefully, they say that once that happens, after that, it's fairly quick. This long delay has been just gathering all the information and getting the application together.
Great, thank you. I have no other questions, Governor.
Thank you, Ms. Salazar, and I agree with you and Mr. Wells, there's an adequate reserve there, but regardless of what the reserve is, that's what that money's for, is to
Right.
help these people. So whether it draws it down, to me, it doesn't matter how far it's drawn down as long as we're helping the victims at that horrible tragedy. But in any event, that's still adequate money for whatever may come, and it's just a matter of time before we get that money from the federal government. Okay, if there are no further, sorry, Madam Secretary?
I just want to thank the ladies for all their hard work and everything that I'm sorry. I just wanted to thank them for everything that they're doing, and I know it's a difficult task, but thank you very much for being there and doing this and the reports.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Well said,
Thanks,
Madam
Governor.
Secretary. If there are no further questions or comments, the chair will accept a motion to approve the third quarter report and fiscal year 2018 fourth quarter recommendation presented in agenda item number 4.
Move for approval?
Secretary of State has moved for approval. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by the Attorney General. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I hear none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes 3-0. Thank you very much. We'll move to agenda item number 5, which is a review and consideration of a victims of crime appeal. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. NRS 217 regulates the compensation for certain victims of criminal acts. Victims apply to the program and a determination is made as to whether or not the victim is entitled to compensation from the program. A victim whose claims are denied can appeal to a hearings officer to have their claims reconsidered. And then the victim or the clerk of the Board of Examiners may appeal the decision of the hearings officer to an appeals officer. And both the hearings officer and appeals officer processes are under the jurisdiction of the Department of Administration. Upon the appeals officer's decision, NRS 217.117 subsection 3 allows the applicant or the clerk of the Board of Examiners to appeal the decision made by the appeals officer to the Board of Examiners. The Board of Examiners can render a decision in the case or hold a hearing on the matter. The item for consideration today is a review of the record of an appeals officer decision of an appeal by applicant Richard Cancella III. Mr. Cancella was notified of today's meeting. Within 15 days of today's hearing, the board shall either render the decision on the case or it may decide to hold a hearing on the matter. and the board may affirm, modify, or reverse the decision of the appeals officer. And then within 30 days, it would need to reconsider the evidence. If it decides to hold a hearing within 30 days, it would need to reconsider all of the evidence provided by both the applicant and the Victims of Crime program. And Ms. Morgando and Ms. Salazar are available to answer any questions on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Wills. Ms. Salazar, Ms. Morgando, do you have any comments or statement you'd like to make with regard to this agenda item?
Governor, no additional statements. We rely on the decision rendered by the appeals officer. Thank you.
And the essence of that decision is that the claimant was the aggressor and not a victim.
That is correct.
Questions or comments from board members?
None. Thank you, Governor.
And then just for purposes of the record, the claimant's name is Richard Cancilla, C-A-N-C-I-L-L-A III, Roman numeral 3. Is Mr. Cancilla present? Either in Carson City or Las Vegas?
Not in Las Vegas, Governor.
All right. But if there are no, I see no reason to reverse or upset the decision of the appeals officer, but obviously he disputes the findings of the appeals officer as well as the contents of the statements from other witnesses. But in any event, happy to hear from the other board members on this agenda item.
Governor, yeah, I have no concerns and would move to affirm, is the proper language, move to affirm the appeals officer's decision.
The Attorney General has moved to affirm the decision of the appeals officer. Is there a second?
I second it, Governor.
Second by the Secretary of State. Any questions or discussion on the motion? Hear none, all in favor say aye.
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 That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 6, request to purchase state vehicles. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. There are 2 requests for 5 vehicles in agenda item 6 this morning. The first request is from the Department of Administration Fleet Services to purchase 2 replacement vehicles, one for the Division of Parole and Probation, the other for the Division of Public and Behavioral Health. Both were totaled in accidents, and they will be replaced using insurance proceeds and agency reserves. And this purchase is subject to the approval of a non-IFC work program. The second request is from the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, Division of State Parks. They are requesting to purchase 1 replacement and 2 new vehicles for various parks around the state. The replacement vehicle has met the age and or mileage requirements in SAM, and all 3 of these vehicles were included in the agency's legislatively approved budget. And there are representatives available to answer any questions board members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. And before I take action on agenda item number 6, I wanted to go back to agenda item number 5 to finish the record. So was there an effort to let Mr. Cancilla know the time and date of this hearing?
Yes, Governor. We notified him both in writing, and we talked to him on the phone and told him of the time and date of the meeting.
And again, just so for purpose of the record, so you were able to reach him and you verbally advised him of the time and date of this hearing?
Yes, we did.
And then just, again, I'm not sure if I said it, but for the record, Mr. Cancilla was not present in Las Vegas or Carson City. All right, thank you. All right, we'll move back to agenda item number 6, which is a request to purchase state vehicle. Straightforward for me. Board members, any questions with regard to agenda item number 6?
I have none.
Move to approve.
The Attorney General has moved to approve the request to purchase state vehicles as presented in agenda item number 6. Madam Secretary, did you say you seconded the motion?
Yes, I do, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the Secretary of State has seconded the motion. Any questions or discussion? There are none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And did you say aye, Mr. Attorney General?
Yes, Governor.
Okay, thank
Aye.
you. Yeah, that motion passes 3-0. We'll move to agenda item number 7, which is request to designate positions in state government as critical labor shortages. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. Pursuant to NRS 286.523, it is the policy of the state to ensure that the reemployment of retired public employees is limited to positions of extreme need. An employer who desires to employ a retired public employee to fill a position for which there is a critical labor shortage must make the determination of reemployment based on the appropriate and necessary delivery of services to the public in an open meeting. And the Board of Examiners has the authority to designate positions in state government for which there are critical labor shortages. In determining whether to designate a position as critical labor shortage, the board is to consider and make findings on the efforts made to fill the positions through other means, the turnover rate for the position, the number of openings and the number of qualified candidates, the length of time the position has been vacant, any special circumstances, education, or experience requirements for the positions, and the history and success of recruitment efforts. There is one request for a designation of critical labor shortage in this agenda item, and should the board approve the designation, it can delegate to the clerk the notice requirement to PERS, and I will work with the departments to ensure it is submitted timely. This request is from the Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Aging and Disability Services, to designate the physical therapist for pediatrics classification as a critical labor shortage and grant a PERS exception for a contract with Ms. Robin Hickman. This is an extension of the request that was approved by the Board of Examiners in March, which was through June 30th of 2018, and this request will designate the position as critical labor shortage through June 30th of 2020. And Administrator Schmidt and her staff are available to answer any questions board members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. I do have a question on this item. And good morning. So my question is this. I'm not going to question that it's a critical labor shortage and a need. My question is the extension to June 30 of 2020 for 2 years. Is this a position that we could not fill within the next 2 years?
Sorry, I needed additional assistance this morning. Ricky Robb, for the record, Deputy Administrator for Aging and Disability Services Division. This has been an ongoing critical shortage for finding a physical therapist who has the actual pediatric experience. So this has not been something that we've been able to fill in the past. And this particular person has filled this position, but we have an upcoming retirement as well, so it's going to continue with our critical shortage. So we're not just looking as this particular person as a quick fix, it's on our long-term critical shortage.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Robin. In the meantime, will you still be trying to hire a state employee to fill that position?
It's currently, Ricky Robb, for the record, it's contracted position. We don't currently have a state position for a physical therapist. So should that be something that we can work towards in the budget process, happy to do so, but unfortunately that has not been the case in the past. It's been a contract position, not a state employee position.
I understand, thank you. Questions from board members in Las Vegas?
Yes, thank you, Governor.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. My question is this for statewide rural areas, or does this person travel all around the state? Just kind of give me a location where this employee is.
Of course, Ricky Robb, for the record. This particular position that we are currently filling is for the rural areas. It is home-based, is in Carson City, works in Hawthorne, Lovelock, depending upon the need. Not typically going to the southern area, but it does stay in the north, but she does travel multiple locations.
Okay, and do we have somebody in the south that fills this need?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so it is really just a rural area.
Currently, it is just a rural area, correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Governor.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Governor, I move to approve.
Attorney General has moved to approve agenda item number 7. Is there a second?
I second it, Governor.
Second by the Secretary of State. Any questions or discussion on the motion? If you're none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 8. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. Pursuant to subsection 4 of NRS 333.705, an agency may contract with a current or former employee without first obtaining Board of Examiners approval if the term of the contract is for less than 4 months and the head of the using agency determines an emergency exists. If a using agency contracts with an individual pursuant to this exception, they must submit a copy of the contract and a description of the emergency to the Board of Examiners, who shall review the contract and description of the emergency and notify the agency whether or not they would have approved the contract had it not been entered into under the emergency provisions. Item 8 is a request from the Office of the Attorney General seeking a favorable recommendation from the board on their use of the emergency provisions to contract with a current university system employee to assist with lawsuits and other criminal matters. The office has contracted with this employee since March of 2010 to assist with various matters on a case-by-case basis, totaling approximately 600 hours since 2010. It was recently discovered that she has always been employed by the system of higher education, but previous contracts did not identify her as a current employee. And there are representatives available from the Office of the Attorney General to answer any other questions board members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. I have no questions. Questions from Southern Nevada?
I have none.
Governor, I think we just wanted to make it clear that this was something that went back to 2010 and that we are trying to basically rectify this going backwards and for the future. So I don't know that we need to make any further record, but I just wanted to make at least that record before we move to vote on it.
All right.
Okay, you want to call for it?
All right, I'll call for the vote on 8, the recommendation regarding the agency's determination to use the emergency provision to contract with the current and/or former state employee.
The Secretary of State has moved to approve the recommendation regarding the agency's determination to use the emergency provision to contract with a current and/or former state employee. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by the Attorney General. Any questions or discussion? Hear none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 9, authorization to contract with a current and/or former state employee. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. Item 9 includes 5 requests to contract with current and/or former employees pursuant to NRS 333.705, subsection 1. The first request is from State Purchasing, who contracts with Allied Universal Security Services through a master services agreement to provide uniformed security guards to various state agencies. This request is for Allied Universal to use a former employee who retired in April to perform these services. Allied Universal also uses these employees on other contracted jobs with non-state of Nevada employers. The second, third, and fourth requests are from the Department of Transportation to allow contracted vendors to use former employees on projects awarded to those vendors. The second and third requests are for Inspector Level 4 positions on an as-needed basis in District 3. The employees retired in January 2017 and January 2018, respectively. And the fourth request is for an Inspector Level 4 position on a full-time basis in District 2. This employee retired in March of 2017 and was previously approved at the April 2018 Board of Examiners meeting to fill an Inspector Level 3 position with another company. The employee states he no longer works for that company that was previously approved and has gone to work for the company listed in this item. And these employees did not have any influence or authority over the contracts with the vendors. The final request is from the Office of the Attorney General to utilize a current system of higher education employee to assist with lawsuits and criminal matters for the office as a whole and the Torts Claims Fund. The employee will be engaged on a case-by-case basis at a rate of $400 per hour for the period of July 1st, 2018 through June 30th of 2020. This item relates to information contracts 3 and 8 under agenda item number 17. And there are representatives available from the various departments to answer any additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. I have no questions on agenda item number 9. Board members, any questions?
I move to approve.
Second.
The Attorney General has moved to approve or authorize to contract with a current and/or former state employee as presented in agenda item number 9. The Secretary of State has seconded the motion. Any questions or discussion? I hear none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Attorney General, I just didn't hear your vote.
Aye.
Okay,
Sorry, Governor.
Thank you. That
I think
motion
I'm saying at the
passes.
exact same time as the Secretary.
That motion passes 3-0. We'll move to agenda item number 10, request for recommendation of approval to the IFC for an allocation amount from the contingency account. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. Item 10 includes 4 requests for positive recommendations to the Interim Finance Committee pursuant to NRS 353.268 for allocations from the General Fund Contingency Account, and 1 request for a positive recommendation for an allocation from the Highway Fund Contingency Account. The General Fund Contingency Account has approximately $14.5 million to cover unanticipated costs for the remainder of the 2017-19 biennium, and the Highway Fund Contingency Account has a balance of approximately $1.7 million to cover unanticipated costs for the balance of the biennium. The first 2 requests are from the Forestry Division of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. The first is a request for $1,621,538 to cover expected firefighting costs through the end of the fiscal year due to the unusually active FY18 fire season. This is the 4th installment to fund firefighting activities for FY18, including a work program for carrying back $2.5 million in FY19 appropriations, $1.5 million in wildland fire protection program reserves, an allocation from the statutory contingency account of $1.95 million, and an April IFC allocation of just over $1 million. If this request is approved by IFC, the total added to the FY18 fire suppression would be approximately $8.6 million. The second request is in the amount of $2.5 million is to replenish the 2019 funds that were carried back in order to provide the division with sufficient resources to operate opening FY19. The division is expecting a large payment from the Fire Management Assistance Grant Program related to the Little Valley Fire, but the timing of the payment, which is subject to congressional approval, is unknown at this time. Once that payment is received, we'll need to work with the division on the disposition of that payment. The third request in the amount of $3,174,606 is from the Department of Corrections to cover projected shortfalls in personnel services, medical costs, and utilities expenses in FY18. The fourth request in the amount of $232,998 is from the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals to complete information technology projects in fiscal year 19, where funding was not authorized by the 2017 legislature for both years of the biennium. And the final request in the amount of $8,691 is from the Department of Public Safety Division of Investigations from the Highway Fund to cover a projected shortfall in personnel services for fiscal year 18. If all of the general fund allocations are approved by IFC, the general fund contingency account will have approximately $7 million to cover unanticipated costs for the remainder of the 2017-19 biennium. And there are representatives available from the various departments and branches of government to answer any additional questions board members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. I see Ms. Casey here. Ms. Casey, I have just a couple questions for you. And good morning. And first of all, my compliments to you and everyone with you, the firefighters, for the way they've handled, the fires that we've had so far. So it's been extraordinary, particularly here south of Carson. And my understanding is in Smith Valley is under control. Is that?
Yes, that's our understanding as well. 1,202 acres as of this morning.
Okay. Well, thank you for that as well. So the question is this: I just want an idea of, and it is what it is. I mean, this is money we need to and have to spend to ensure public safety and protect the environment, all those things associated with your duties and responsibilities. Are there any other outstanding amounts that we need to be aware of as we move forward?
Thank you, Governor, and members of the committee. Good morning. For the record, Casey, State Forester Fire Warden for the Division of Forestry. The outstanding bills that we have, most of them have been worked for 17 and 18 where we have expenditures. We are currently working through, and I should say most for 18, except for the most current ones that have just happened. But then we are working through cost share agreements. Those are some of the ones that we aren't sure right now if the final cost share hasn't been adjudicated. So some of those cost shares change based on mapping, based on whatever happens afterward. So those are what we're currently working through right now. They've been working tirelessly in our billing department to get all of these bills out. As Jim had mentioned, we have been working very closely with FEMA. FEMA has agreed to pay us partial payments on all of our 17 FMAGs, 3 of which should be coming in. The payments will be available for drawdown today. It's about $250,000 Little Valley is in DC right now, and they have told us that it will be coming soon, but I don't know what soon means in that process. So it took us about 2 to 3 weeks to get the payments for the other ones that didn't go to DC. So we are still hopeful they will come in before August, but we're not sure.
No, thank you. And what is the estimated amount for Little Valley for the reimbursement?
I believe it was upwards of 4 million, but let me look for sure. It was close to a little over 5 million.
So it's possible, and I'm not going to hold you to that, it's possible that we could see that 5 million perhaps in the fall or even August.
We're hopeful it comes in before the close of the fiscal year, but again, I don't know the time frame. We haven't had many that have been over the threshold that end up in DC, so.
Well, thank you. And just a question for Mr. Wells. So mechanically, if we get that reimbursement, does that go into this fund when the money comes?
That is part of the discussion that we'll need to have. Certainly there'll be discussion about replenishing both the IFC contingency as well as the statutory contingency funds for the amounts that were requested up to the amount that is available. But there's also going to be some considerations of what expenses are expected in FY19 and whether or not we would just be putting money back in to take it back out. So there'll be additional discussions with the Legislative Council Bureau staff as well as the Forestry Division before we make that determination.
So in other words, we may just leave the money with you and rather than just moving it to the IFC contingency or this contingency fund, because, God forbid that we have any more fires, but if we do, we may need those resources, and why have the extra steps? Is that correct, Ms. Casey?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
We are looking to have a pretty busy fire season to date. If you wanted to have a quick update, 116 fires, 8,100 acres. That does not include Upper Colony. As I had said, that would be 117. We're looking to start kind of like last year. We're 92% human caused at this time. We've had a couple lightning starts, a lot of interesting tricks happening, but we've been doing a huge campaign again this year on target shooting. That's the primary one. There have been some other ones. We've worked with our partners, gone out across the state with an interagency prevention team to try to ensure that this lessens over time, but just the fuel loads out there because of all the moisture we got and the lack of winter precipitation to knock down last year's fuels. So luckily we haven't gotten into large lightning starts yet, but that's probably to come as we start to dry out. See a lot more thunder boomers starting, so.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you to the men and women of, firefighters and everyone else who's associated with your efforts. They do an incredible job.
Thank you. I will let them know.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Attorney General, Madam Secretary, do you have any questions for Ms. Casey?
No, Governor, thank you, and thank you and all of your firefighters for what you do. Thanks.
Thank you all for your support as well.
That's all. Thank you. I also had a couple questions with regard to Department of Corrections. I saw Director Zarenda is here. Good morning, gentlemen. Director Zarenda, did you have any statement you wanted to make prior to any questions or comments?
This is James Renda for the record. The only statement I just wanted to make, we did work very difficult tasks of getting to this point of bringing our budget down and making sure that it was under control. And we do have procedures in place for long-term planning of this budget for next season. And I do believe that we've made a lot of accomplishments with the help of a lot of people and a lot of agencies, and I do believe this is appropriate.
No, thank you, Director Zarenda, and I wanted to compliment you and the members of your staff. I think the last time we talked, we were looking at a possible $22 million budget overage, and it's been reduced to $3 million. So that's a good thing, given that we only had $7 million left in the contingency account. So again, my thanks for that. I asked you this question, I believe it was in the audit committee, with regard to some discussion that as a result of these cuts, that it was possible that that the correctional officers or the inmates would have been put in any type of danger, and obviously that has never been the case, but I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to comment on that.
Sure, James Renner for the record again. There was what we did for when we started reducing some of our overtime concerns, we monitored our overtime daily as well as the incident rates daily to see if there was any increase in incidents, increase in violence, increase of assaults, fights, those things that would represent violence increasing. We did not find any, and we monitored it daily. If we did, we would have reacted quickly. One facility had a spike in one of our point factors, which was Northern Nevada Correctional Center, but that was not related to the overtime reduction. It was actually related to where we consolidated the state's mental health from every facility and then located at the Northern Correctional Center and increased and changed the mission of the agency for mental health at that location, which has now since stabilized, and we came into better procedures and how we were handling the mental health there. But nothing was related to what we did in our budget or overtime reduction.
Thank you, Director Zerenda. And my final comment, or perhaps a question is, and I think you mentioned it in your opening remarks, but the controls are in place to continue, the way that you've been operating, and so we're not looking, barring something unforeseen, that we would get in a deficit situation moving forward. So in other words, if this is approved today, this $3 million, you should be able to keep it at zero moving forward.
James Renner for the record, that's my goal. I can't predict incidents that can create these things or medical issues that can increase, but our goal is what we're doing is we're going to balance a budget so that we can continue this permanently to make sure that safety security is measured, we have appropriate procedures in place, and we don't come into a crisis situation with our budget again.
Yeah. No, and thank you. And the only other reason I asked that question is we're building the new budget now, and we have to know, how to build that budget. And is it based on what was happening before? Is it based on what you're doing now? And I know you're working closely with Mr. Wells and folks in my office and me in order to get that accomplished. So again, there are a lot of different considerations that are happening now with regard to the way you're operating. So I truly appreciate your hard work. Questions from board members on agenda item 10C?
No, Governor.
Thank you, gentlemen. If there are no further questions or comments with regard to agenda item number 10, the chair will accept a motion to approve the request for recommendation of approval of the IFC committee for an allocation amount from the contingency account, agenda items 10A, B, C, D, and E.
Governor, before we move to approve these, I'd like to ask, is there anyone from the Supreme Court or judicial branch that would want to talk about this agenda item? If I can ask Mr. Wells, then, I know we got some information from the court just on Friday, but am I right in understanding that they did not want us to approve this? Or have I not understood that correctly?
Good morning.
Good morning. Robin Sweet, Administrative Office of the Courts Director. With me is Todd Myler, our Manager of Budgets, and Rick Stephanie, our Chief Information Officer. We do need the money. We are providing a possible alternative source for that funds, but we need the money to finish the project. So we either need the money from the IFC, from the contingency fund, or we need approval to do our proposal with the administrative assessments.
So when you say administrative assessments, what do you mean by that?
The administrative assessments are part of our funding source for the Supreme Court. Administrative assessments are fees that are tacked on to predominantly traffic tickets, and 51% of those are needed, are provided to the judicial branch budgets. Part of that money goes to the Supreme Court as well. So the Supreme Court is funding in part by administrative assessments, and in part by general fund. And so we believe that if we move some of the authorized but unspent administrative assessments forward, carry them forward, we could finish this project. However, if Mr. Wells' comments are that that's not an option, and so then we need the contingency fund money.
Thank you, Ms. Sweet. Any other questions?
Director Sweet, I just wanted to make sure that I'm being responsive to the Chief Justice. And so I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, that you all ideally want to get the IFC to approve the funding mechanism, not through the contingency account, but I want to make sure that you all are okay with us at least voting for this today and making sure that if that interpretation doesn't hold true, that you do have the contingency account to fall back on. Is that a position you all are comfortable with?
Robin Sweet, for the record, yes, sir, that's why we're bringing this forward to the contingency fund,
Okay.
to the Board of Examiners to do that process.
Okay, great. And I think that ultimately the IFC will have to make that determination. It's not something that really the Board of Examiners, as the three of us voting, can make that determination. So I'm certainly in support of making sure that the funds are available through the contingency account, and we'll see which interpretation prevails at the IFC. I have no further questions, Governor.
Madam Secretary, any questions?
No, Governor, thank you.
All right, then. Thank you very much. The chair will accept a motion again to approve agenda item number 10.
Okay, I move to approve.
Sub-items. Attorney General has moved for approval. Is there a second?
I second the motion, Governor.
Second by the Secretary of State. Any questions or discussion on the motion? Hear none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 11, request for the allocation and disbursement of funds for salary adjustments. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. Sections 4, 5, 6, and 7 of Assembly Bill 517 and Sections 2, 3, 4, and 5 of Senate Bill 368 from the 2017 legislative session appropriated salary adjustment funds to the Board of Examiners to cover vacancy salary savings that are built into agency budgets, as well as the 3% cost of living adjustments that were effective July 1st, 2017, and were not included in the agency salary budgets. An agency whose actual salaries exceed their budgeted amount due to the vacancy savings or the cost of living adjustments are allowed to request salary adjustment dollars from the Board of Examiners. This item requests access to those funds by the Department of Public Safety Division of Investigations to cover the cost of COLAs in the amount of $8,612 in highway funds. There are various institutions and accounts within the system of higher education to cover vacancy savings and the cost of living adjustments in the amount of $11,179,069 in higher education general funds. The Tahoe Regional Planning Agency is covering one-time bonuses pursuant to Section 13 of AB 517 and Section 9 of Senate Bill 368 in the amount of $18,216 in general funds, and the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs Stewart Indian School Living Legacy account to cover the cost of the COLAs in the amount of $3,041 in general funds. And there is a typo on page 6, about 2/3 of the way down the page. Budget account 3004 is actually Business Center South, not Business Center North.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wells. My only question for purpose of the record is this is both expected and budgeted for, correct?
That's correct, Governor. And actually, this is pretty light so far. I mean, most of the agencies have been covering their salary adjustment dollars within their means. We expect to see some more in July and potentially some more in August. But so far, we have not seen even as much as we would have expected.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members with regard to agenda item number 11?
Mr. Wells, I have one question. So the first line item, budget account 3743 for NDI, is that the same allocation that we just approved for agenda item 10E, or are those two separate contingencies?
It is one overage being funded by two different means. The salary adjustment dollars are limited for each budget account, so this particular budget account is limited in salary adjustment dollars to the $8,612. Their shortfall is almost $17,000, hence the need for the additional $8,000 from the contingency fund.
Okay, thank you.
Governor?
Yes, Madam Secretary.
Thank you. I have a disclosure on agenda item number 11. If I could do that now?
Yes,
Would that-
yes.
Okay, thank you. Request for allocations and distribution of the funds for the salary adjustments is the area. And I, as the Secretary of State, am a board member of TRPA, and I did approve the budget when we last met for the 2019-2020. And I do not believe that the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in my situation would be materially affected. Based on the nature of my relationship with TRPA, I am not going to recuse from voting on agenda item number 15. I now ask our board counsel if that disclosure is satisfactory under NRS Chapter 281A. It should be 11, right?
11.
11.
Yeah, it shouldn't be 15, it should be 11.
And to clarify, Madam Secretary, that's 11C.
C, yes.
And as to form, Madam Secretary, that is appropriate.
Okay. So just that it was item number 11C, I had 15 by mistake. I apologize, and then just wanted to make sure that that's within my realm. So is that all right?
Yes,
Yes,
Madam
okay,
Secretary,
thank you.
as to form, it's appropriate.
Okay. Thank you, Governor.
No, thank you, Madam Secretary. And I just, again, for precision in the record, when you say 11C, I don't know if there's a C. I mean, it does say,
In my book, there is.
oh.
In my book, there's an A,
Oh,
B,
I see
C.
with the tab. With the
Yeah.
tab, I see. Okay.
Is that all right? Is that all
Yeah,
right?
That's sufficient. That's
Okay.
sufficient, thank you. So if there are no further questions or comments, the chair will accept a motion to approve agenda item number 11 with the amendment to budget account number 3004, which should read Business Center South.
I move to approve.
Attorney
I'll
General
second.
has moved for approval. The Secretary of State has seconded the motion. Any questions or comments on the motion? I hear none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 12, which is approval of master lease agreements. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. Item 12 is a request from the Department of Administration Enterprise IT Services Division to amend a master lease agreement with IBM for mainframe storage equipment, software, and services. This amendment would increase the cost by $1,291,762 due to the addition of hardware and hardware maintenance for the mainframe server. And there are representatives from the division available to answer any questions the board members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. I have no questions. Board members, any questions with regard to agenda item number 12?
I have none. I'll move for approval.
Secretary of State has moved to approve.
I second.
Agenda item number 12. The Attorney General has seconded the motion. Any questions or discussion on the motion? I hear none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-0. We'll move to agenda item 13, request for a specific travel policy change. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. Pursuant to subsection 6 of NRS 281.160, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources is seeking approval from the Board of Examiners to update their travel reimbursement policy, which includes travel reimbursement rates that are less than the U.S. General Services Administration rates that are used generally for state employees. For those employees who work in the field for several days or weeks at a time, the department is proposing a camping gear reimbursement allowance to cover all personally owned gear and camping equipment, as well as any campground fees paid by the traveler. The requested rate is $40 per night for all personal gear and campground fees and is a flat rate for any location. And meals would still be reimbursed at the GSA standard non-surveyed rate for employees in camping status. The proposed policy also includes a provision for the use of personal aircraft at a rate not to exceed the cost of a commercial flight, and along with appropriate proof of insurance to risk management prior to the use of personal aircraft. And representatives from the department, I believe, would like to make a revision to the section on the use of personal aircraft and are available to answer any other questions that the board members may have.
Governor,
Yeah,
if you have something, go ahead.
Yeah, just before I take your question, Madam Secretary, there is a representative who has a comment on the use of personal aircraft, the language contained therein. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. For the record, Dominic Etchegoyen, Deputy Director for the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. For the record, we're not wedded to the language that is included here. We only included it at the direction of the State Administrative Manual, Section 0206, which does list a number of issues that should be addressed by the department. So we don't have anybody currently looking to make use of this particular reimbursement for the use of personal aircraft. But given the concern that has been raised, we certainly understand the optics. And to clarify, we would suggest adding language that states, under no circumstances may reimbursement for use of personal aircraft exceed the cost of the commercial air alternative or the travel expenses the employee otherwise would have incurred while traveling by state vehicle on state business.
Thank you, Mr. Etchegoyen, and I was curious if we had state employees who own their own personal aircraft.
We do not currently, but I've done some research and found out that within maybe the last 10 years, we did have employees that use state aircraft, and I believe that's probably why the State Administrative Manual directed the individual departments to address this issue.
And just mechanically, I would imagine they wouldn't use that personal aircraft to fly out of state. So how would you determine a commercial rate flying from, say, Carson City to Austin?
It's a good question. And it's something that we have asked the pilot for the state airplane. We found out that we could fly to other locations other than Elko and other than Las Vegas. And he instructed us that he's got a calculation, and unfortunately I don't know what that calculation is, to determine what a commercial rate might have been going to somewhere like Panaca. And we thought that there would be a calculus there that we could use in this instance, or we could fall back on what the cost would have been to drive the mileage using a state vehicle and all associated costs there. But we have not created that calculus.
Thank you, Mr. Etchegoyen. Madam Secretary, did you have a question?
I do. Thank you very much. Help refresh my memory, Mr. Wells, but I thought we had been talking about this whole number 13 about camping and paying for that. Did they raise the rate or did we add aircraft? Is that why this is in there? But I thought we'd already approved something along these lines about the reimbursement for camping. Am I wrong?
No, Madam Secretary, you're exactly correct. We have approved almost an identical policy for the Department of Wildlife and the Minerals Commission. But
Okay.
each agency has to have their own travel policy.
Gotcha. Thank you. I thought, whoa, I'm losing it, but that really helps me a lot. No, thank you. So everybody's going to come to us asking for camping, right? Camping, giving us reimbursement, right? Thank you. Thanks, Governor.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? And Mr. Etchegoyen, have you provided your proposed language to Mr. Wells or the Secretary so we can have that as part of the record?
I have not, but I will.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions or comments, the chair will accept a motion to approve the request for a specific travel policy change with the amendment supplied by Mr. Etchegoyen on the use of personal aircraft.
Governor, I'll make the motion, but I do have just a question that came to mind for Mr. Wells, if I might. But I will make the motion. Do you want a second before I?
Why don't you ask the question first?
Okay.
And then I'll take the motion.
Are all of these policies, Mr. Wells, are they identical? Did the other ones have aircraft in them? Because I do know that time is of a lot to do with the aircraft instead of driving and location. But I wondered if the other policies have aircraft in them as well, or is it just this one?
Not all agencies have use of personal aircraft. However, there are several other agencies who have addressed that in their policy. I believe that the Department of Agriculture has a use policy for personal aircraft. I believe that the Department of Wildlife also has one. Offices like ours do not. So it just kind of depends on the various offices around the state.
Okay, thank you. And my motion stands. I still want to approve it. I just was curious about the other divisions. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you. The Secretary has moved to approve agenda item number 13, again with the amendment on the provision regarding personal aircraft as supplied by Mr. Echegoyen. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by the Attorney General. Any questions or discussion on the motion? There are none. All in favor say aye.
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 That motion passes 3-0. Thank you. Agenda item number 14, approval of proposed leases. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. There are 5 leases in agenda item 14 for approval by the board this morning, and no additional information has been requested by any of the members.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. I have no questions. Board members, any questions on agenda item number 14?
No, Governor. I move to approve.
Attorney General has moved to approve the proposed leases presented in agenda item number 14. Is there a second?
I second it, Governor.
Second by the Secretary of State. Any questions or discussion? There are none. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-0. We'll move to agenda item number 15, approval of proposed contracts. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. There are 77 contracts in agenda item 15 for approval by the board this morning. Contracts 5, 25, 29, and 47 are contingent upon approval of work programs at the Interim Finance Committee meeting tomorrow. Contract number 28 is contingent upon approval of an extension to the underlying contract between the vendor and Chicago Public Schools. And contract number 63 between the Department of Corrections and the Office of the Attorney General has the wrong description. The actual description should read that this is a new interlocal contract to provide for the Automated Victim Information and Notification System, or VINE. The public safety entities that utilize the system will cost share with the Office of the Attorney General. All other information in that contract is correct. Members have requested additional information on contract number 20 between the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs and Falgren, Inc., and contracts 35 and 36 between the Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Aging and Disability Services, and the Center for Autism and Behavioral Analysis, LLC, and Summit Autism Services, LLC.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Do we have a representative from the Department of Tourism with regard to contract number 20? Morning, Mr. Peterson. So this is a big number of contracts, so if you would give an idea of what it includes, and perhaps I was hoping you'd bring one of those books that you passed out the other day, which was really good, but please proceed.
Well, thank you, Governor, members of the board. For the record, David Peterson, Interim Director of Tourism and Cultural Affairs. With me today is our Interim Deputy Director, Brendan Nebeski. Thank you for the opportunity to walk you through what an advertising spend looks like domestically. What I'm going to do is talk you through what we're proposing for fiscal 19, just to give you an idea of how that $8 million is spent. So we're going to be doing broadcast spot television. Those are market-specific dollars that are going to go into our primary markets, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Phoenix, and Salt Lake City, about $3.1 million. In addition, we'll be doing digital ads, banner ads, and rich media on advertisers such as AdParlor, Omnivert, and Pandora. Those will be in our primary markets, as well as our secondary markets like Boise, Dallas, Portland, Sacramento, and San Diego. About $1.8 million will be allocated toward those digital ads. We also will be doing some online travel agency, OTA partnerships with entities like Priceline, Expedia, and TripAdvisor. Those will be in our primary plus those secondary markets I previously mentioned. Just over $1 million will be allocated to those partnerships. In addition, and this is something that we're really focusing on, is paid content partnerships with entities like Matador, Sojourn, and Atlas Obscura, and we'll be in those primary markets plus the secondary markets I mentioned. Just under $700,000 we're allocating for those particular buys. In addition, we'll have some broadcast spots on a national level, about $600,000 through the Travel Channel Integrated Network as well. We'll also be doing print ads in Lonely Planet and Outside, those types of magazines. About $450,000 we're allocating toward those print ads. In addition, we'll be spending about $250,000 on web streaming video ads on like a Hulu as an example. And again, that would be with our primary and our secondary markets. And about $124,000 on search through Bing. And so that comprises our $8 million. And what I'd like to point out too, through the process of contracting with Fahlgren, we're only paying a 4% commission, so a little over $300,000, about $308,000. In the past, we've paid upwards of 15% commissions, and we did receive bids during this process with commission rates as high as 12%. So I think 4% is great because we're able to invest more money back into the ads themselves in those different channels and mediums. And then the other thing too, we're moving forward. We took this up this fiscal year with an always-on strategy, whereby we're running ads 12 months a year. And we're really competing for visitors now, year-round, instead of doing specific ad campaigns in the fall or winter or spring and summer. And with that, the always-on strategy really allows us to respond in a real-time manner to the different markets that we're in, as well as with our own creative, so we can optimize those media buys on a monthly basis. So that's kind of a breakdown on how that $8 million is being spent.
Oh, thank you. And is Fahlgren new, or didn't they have the account before?
For the record, David Peterson, yes, we're currently under contract with Fahlgren right now.
And then just for the fun of it, or I hope if it's a secret, say so, but what's the theme? Is it going to continue to be the Don't Fence Me In type theme?
For the record, David Peterson, yes, we plan to continue forward with the Don't Fence Me In theme. And we're really going to focus and emphasize Travel Nevada as we move forward. But yes, the Don't Fence Me In theme will still be current and moving forward.
All right, thank you. Board members, any questions with regard to this contract?
No, Governor.
Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to contracts 35 and 36. DHHS. And good morning again. And the purpose of I asked for these contracts to be held out. I have a lot of concern with regard to the autism population, and there has been conversations that the wait list has started to grow. And so my understanding is that these two contracts will hopefully go toward trying to decrease that wait list. So if you would give me and the board members an idea of where we are and where we're going, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Governor and members of the board. Dina Schmidt, I'm Administrator for Aging and Disability Services. And with me, I have Ricky Robb, our Deputy Administrator, and Melissa Lewis, our Administrative Service Officers. So these are two new contracts for new providers to provide applied behavioral analysis services to children. We have increased our number of providers. I think at the close of last session, we were, the intent was for us to increase. We were at 31. We're now at 53. This will bring us to 53 along with some of the providers that are going through the RFQ process. So we do anticipate finally being able to look at that wait list. We are also working to transition a lot of our providers to direct service or to direct billing with Medicaid, which will allow the state general fund dollars to go to those kids that don't have access to services. So we do anticipate in this next fiscal year to start to decrease that wait list.
Wonderful, and thank you. And so when you say decrease it, do you know what the number on the wait list is now? Ms. Robb.
Ricky Robb for the record. Our current caseload is 668 children, and our current wait list is, as of May 31st, is 519. And there has been a shift on that wait list based on, we currently had children who would be receiving managed care coverage, and they were on our wait list, and we're working with those individuals to receive managed care. And so those have actually been removed from the wait list. So you'll actually see a decrease based on the MCO children being removed from the wait list.
So there'll be a double benefit here. So we'll see a decrease as a result of the managed care, also a decrease as a result of the approval of these contracts.
Ricky Rob, for the record, correct.
And do you know how far we'll go? Any idea?
So what our initial plan is for those 2 providers that will be hopefully approved today. We're looking at 15 to 20 children to be able to go immediately to them. Those individuals are connecting with Medicaid to direct bill, as well as other private providers. So we'll do a mix of that caseload from the wait list. And so we're looking at 40 children, approximately 40 children starting from the wait list as of July 1. And then we'll phase that as those new providers. We have 7 additional providers on the BOE for July. And so we'll phase those in as we move forward as well. So as we grow the providers, the capacity grows, the wait list will decrease.
How many, just, and I know you can't be too precise, but can you estimate how many those kids that each of the providers can take? So for example, if we approve 7 providers, how many kids can those providers take?
Ricky Rob, for the record, for at this point in time, our estimate is about 15 to 20 initially. Because of the case mix of those children, we have 8 case plans that they can go within, whether it be straight ATAP, Medicaid, fee-for-service. So we try and mix so that it's not overwhelming one provider with just Medicaid or just straight ATAP. So about 15 to 20. So with those 9 providers, a little over 100 plus at this point is our goal. Okay. But we do plan on working with the providers. We're working with them as their direct billing, our current providers. So that's actually helping as well. So there were some providers who had not been direct billing Medicaid, and so we've been working directly with them. And so we have multiple who are actually billing directly. So they're going to be able to take from that wait list as well. So doing the case mix is helping us to be able to eliminate that a little bit quicker.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for all your efforts in this regard, and the reason I delved a little deeper than I normally do, but as we build the budget, I know I've had this conversation at the table of the proposed budget, that this is going to continue to be a priority. So I just was asking these questions to see how much we can improve with regard to the waiting list, and hopefully if there's still a balance on that waiting list, that can be built into a budget so that it can be addressed.
That's our goal as well.
Okay,
Thank you, Governor.
All right, Madam Secretary, I know this is a big priority
Yes.
issue for you as well. Madam Secretary.
Thank you very much, Governor. I really appreciate it. My concern in this arena is about the professionals, and do we have specific and qualified individuals that have the skills, or are we still really hunting other states to try to find people that go to school for this in education? I know we have some education issues as well, but that's my big concern, is having qualified people, professionals that can work with these children to help them. Are you seeing an increase, decrease, or is that part of the issue of what you're discussing and the providers have issues with as well?
Ricky Rob, for the record, our RBTs, trying to blank, that is, we are increasing at this point, but there has been challenges in regards to maintaining. So with them, they have a training that they have to conduct. They have to be certified to be reimbursed. And so we have been working with that population to be able to certify as many RBTs as possible to provide that direct service under the direction of a BCBA. So it has been an ongoing challenge. It is pretty a transient group because of the higher education that's being requested and the credentialing, but it is a group that we're working with consistently.
And thank you for that answer. Are you working with the university systems, community colleges?
Ricky Rob, for the record, currently for an RBT, there's not a certification through the community college or the university system. It's a 40-hour credentialing, a national credentialing that they have to go through. They do a 40-hour online, and then they have to have direct service with observation from a BCBA. So that's on the national level, and that's where the credentialing piece comes in. So we have been working on a local level as well as on the maintaining the national certifications.
Okay, and I understand that, but my quest was to ask if you are working with the university systems or the community college to help because that's where we can get a lot of teachers, have them go for higher degrees. That's what I'm looking for. That's why I was asking about working with them or talking to them, having discussions with them about how they can help you. Because we have critical needs in education, and we have kids with special needs, and we're not able to fill those slots. And that's why I'm really concerned, especially in the rural areas, they're having a lot of problems, but also in the big urban areas.
Ricky Robb for the record. My apologies, Madam Secretary. Yes, we have been working with them in regards to our BCBAs, our BCABAs, in those certifications. So yes, absolutely, we are in contact with them. My apologies for misunderstanding.
No, that's okay. I probably didn't state it correctly, but thank you very much, ladies, for all your help.
Thank you.
And thank you, Madam Secretary. And just to, and I don't know if there's a connection here or not, but the OWIN office, the Office of Workforce Investment in Nevada, is a possibility. Manny Lamar, who is the director there, has great relationships with the community colleges and the universities, and may be able to work with you all in terms of improving that pipeline.
Absolutely. Thank you, Governor. And I know that we as a department have been working with them on many initiatives to grow different workforces where we have shortages, and we will continue to do that.
I mean, it even may be that we scholarship people, because I know that those courses don't come for free. So there may be funds for that. All right, thank you. Any other questions from board members with regard to contracts 35 and 36? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, board members, any other questions with regard to agenda item number 15?
Move to approve.
Attorney General has moved to approve the contracts presented in agenda item number 15. Is there a second?
I second it, Governor.
Second by the Secretary of State. Any questions or discussion on the motion? There are none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 16, approval of proposed master service agreements. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. There are 26 master service agreements in agenda item 16 for approval by the board this morning. These agreements include the first replacements for the existing provider agreements that have been utilized by the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation. The purchasing division is going to provide an overview of the provider contract process for the members, and this relates to items 3, 5, 7 through 24, and 26 in agenda item 16.
Good morning, Mr. Hague. We do have a new process, and if you would be willing to share what that process is with the board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, and good morning, members of the board. Jeff Hague, for the record, Administrator of State Purchasing. As Director Wells mentioned, on December 29th of 2017, an all-agency memo was issued calling for the termination of all provider agreements in the state. That termination was due to a concern about the lack of consistency and accuracy of those contracts that were being issued to providers. So as a result, State Purchasing stepped in and worked with the two agencies that were impacted by this the most, DHHS and DETR. We assessed the current state of provider agreements, and we determined that there were roughly, or actually over 500 provider contracts out on the street today, representing hundreds of millions of dollars in state spending, providing dozens of services to vital citizens of the state. We worked with DHHS and DETR in developing a two-step procurement process for these provider agreements moving forward. That first step is a request for qualifications, where we identified qualifications for providers based on state and federal requirements. We facilitated this RFQ through the state's new e-procurement system, Nevada ePro, which was approved in the last session. We've engaged with over 500 vendors through that process to educate them on the RFQ and what our qualifications, what their qualifications are and how we would vet those. That process is going very well. To date, we've engaged with over 400 providers across the state. We have 21 contracts that are up for approval today, and we have over 400 that are in the process and hope to be before this board at the July Board of Examiners meeting. The second stage in the process is agencies who choose to use qualified providers will engage in what we've termed a service agreement with that provider. Those service agreements will outline the specific scope of work that they're engaging those folks with, the cost of those services, and the term of that respective scope. Those will be negotiated with the agencies directly and those providers, and will serve as the authorization for work to begin providing those critical services. And we expect those service agreements to begin after approval today, or assuming approval is done today. Governor, members of the board, I have to take this opportunity to say thank you. This was a tremendous effort impacting very important folks in the state, representing critical services, and the effort that was done by the governor's finance office, by the folks at DHHS and DETR, our team at state purchasing was really tremendous. To be able to turn the tide on over 500 contracts in a 6-month period of time, realizing the services that they provide, we could not have done this without the thoughtful engagement of all of those involved. So a tremendous thank you to them. We're excited about the efficiencies of this new process and the services that these new agreements will provide, not only DHHS and DETR, but through this statewide initiative, we've also opened these contracts up for our colleagues in local government and other agencies within the state that could also benefit from these services. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hagan. I have no questions, but I also wanted to thank you as well. And just for the other board members' benefit, perhaps this is something that you already know, but it was a concern to me that hundreds of millions of dollars were moving without the benefit of at least a review by this board, and over 500 contracts. And that's not meant to sound pejorative of what was happening before. This is a big change in culture in terms of how we were doing things. And Director Whitley is here in the audience, and I wanted to acknowledge him and his team because it is a big change in culture and how you do things. And I want to thank you for your cooperation in that regard. I think it is going to be an improved system that at the end of the day is going to benefit who we all serve, which are the people of the great state of Nevada. And those, if there are anybody in the audience from DETR and any other affected agency, I want to thank you as well, because it is a sea change. It is a big change. And I know one of the policy reasons why we did the provider agreements before was that there not be an interruption in services to the affected constituencies, but my understanding is that won't happen, is that there is a process in place to continue people receiving the services that they need. But as I said, it will lengthen our agendas for the Board of Examiners, but at the same time, I think it's important, at least for the members of this board, that we have the opportunity to review these contracts along with Mr. Haig and his team over at purchasing, to provide a system that is fair to all the providers, that they have an opportunity to bid on these contracts and provide services. So that's, again, not a question, but a comment. But Mr. Haig, I want to thank you as well for your leadership. Board members, any questions or comments for Mr. Haig with regard to process?
Congratulations, and I move to approve.
Okay, the Attorney General has moved to approve the proposed master service agreements presented in agenda item number 16. Is there a second?
I'll second it, and thank you, Governor, for doing this. I know it will take a lot more for us, but I think I agree with you. It's worth it. Thank you.
Secretary of State has seconded the motion, and I won't be here. I guess I'll be here for the first 6 months of it, but it is really a much better process. And so I'm very happy with how this came out. And Mr. Wells, I know you put a lot of time and effort into this and your team, so thank you as well. So we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or discussion? There are none. All in favor say aye.
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 That motion passes 3-0. We'll move on to agenda item number 17, information item, Clerk of the Board contracts, Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. There were 81 contracts under the $50,000 threshold that were approved by the clerk between April 17th and May 21st of 2018. This item is informational only, and no additional information was requested by any of the members.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wells. I have no questions. Board members, any questions on agenda item 17?
The only question that I would have, Governor, is I just wondered how many of these contracts were for fixes that we needed at the Grant Sawyer building, if anybody knows that. Or you can get it to me later.
I do not believe any of these were specific to fixes for the Grant Sawyer building. There were a few contracts in here for building janitorial services, but they were in here because we are changing the process that we go through for janitorial contracts, and so those contracts are going out to bid, and there needed to be extensions for several of them, but I do not believe that any of the contracts were specific to Grant Sawyer.
Okay. Thank you, Governor.
We'll move to agenda item number 18, another information item, reports on statewide quarterly overtime, as well as Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Division of State Lands. Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Governor. There are two information reports under this item. The first is a report on overtime and accrued compensatory leave for the third quarter. There is a summary report that I won't read. I will say that that there appears to be, after the second quarter, there appears to be some marked improvements in management of overtime for the large using agencies, and I congratulate the agencies who have taken it to heart and gone back and done some real hard work on identifying and managing the overtime that is sometimes necessary, but sometimes not as necessary. The second report is one from the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. That is the report on lands or interest in lands that are transferred, sold, exchanged, or leased under the Tahoe Basin Act and the Lake Tahoe Mitigation Program, and there were no activities for the third quarter under either of those programs. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No, thank you, Mr. Wells, and I know that, Director, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to compliment again Director Zarenda on his efforts at Department of Corrections and his team, but the decrease in the last quarter was $4 million, which was a 69% decrease from the prior quarter, and so again, I really appreciate the hard work that's gone into that. Board members, any questions with regard to agenda item 18A?
None.
18B, Mr. Wells?
That is the report on the Tahoe Basin Act and the Lake Tahoe Mitigation Program. There were no activities under those programs this quarter.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to agenda item 19, public comment. Is there any member of the public in Carson City that would like to provide public comment to the board? I hear and see no one. Is there anyone present in Las Vegas that would like to provide public comment to the board?
We see no one, Governor.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Attorney General has moved to adjourn. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-0. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great day.
Thank you.